Hi, this is David Davis from Actual Tech Media. We're here at the Atlanta VMware Regional User Group meeting. I'm excited to be joined by my friend, Mr. Kendrick Coleman. How you doing, Kenny?
I'm doing fine. It's been years since we've been on camera and on stage together.
Yeah, it's been too long. It's great to see you again. I know you just finished up a big session here at the VMUG. It had something to do with containers. Before we talk about that, just first tell me, what are you doing at VMware these days?
Yeah, so I'm a technical product manager, open source technical product manager at VMware. My role is really looking at, of course, the open source side of things. So I look at some of the open source projects that are being developed in-house. So Project Harbor is one that's near and dear to me. That's all container registry sort of stuff. But I'm also a part of the upstream Kubernetes components. So making sure, I've been on the release team for Kubernetes for the past 4 releases. I was the 1.16 enhancements lead, same with 1.15 and a few ones before there. So making sure I've got a pulse and being a contributor to Kubernetes and kind of helping drive that message forward for VMware that, we're not just consuming the technology, but we're also promoting and being a part of making it bigger and better for everybody else that's out there.
That's right. And by the way, I watched your CNCF, What's New in Kubernetes 1.16 webinar. Yeah, cool content. So anyway, so thank you for being here with me. You're doing some really cool stuff at VMware, and VMware is doing some really cool stuff around Kubernetes. It's like the hashtag everywhere.
It's like you couldn't get away from it, right? I mean, I think it was one thing that kind of surprised a lot of people, especially within the VMware community, was VMworld this year.
Right.
You go to VMworld and you expect to hear something new with inside the kernel or what's going on with vRealize, and then you're like, wait a second, I didn't hear any anything for 3 days or 2 days. It's all Kubernetes. And so it kind of like, I think it struck some people by surprise, but I think it's also, we're trying to help guide the conversation of this is where the application shift's going to happen, and we've got to be ready not only just for VMware, but making sure that our administrators and our user base are also understanding this is how the next wave of applications are going to be delivered too.
Yeah, and I think you predicted this shift like a few years back on Twitter. I think you tweeted something about how VMs are dead, containers are the new thing, and I said, no, Kenny's been drinking too much bourbon again.
Maybe.
No. But you predicted this shift.
I mean, it's funny, like, I thought VM was dead, and because I was coming from a background where I was sitting there, I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't need virtualization anymore. Like, I can run all this on bare metal, I can do this. And then it got to the point where I realized, like, oh man, this is really hard to do this at scale and orchestrate it and keep building stuff. Like, you know how hard it is to like orchestrate bare metal? Like, it's impossible. Right. And so coming over and seeing the side of, okay, VMware and virtualization still has a huge role to play in this because it abstracts everything that we don't want to deal with. And it creates making Kubernetes clusters just much more easy and much more easy to consume from that aspect too.
Right. So, I mean, when you talk to real users here at the VMUG and you just had your session, I'm kind of curious, what's the take from these medium and all size companies out here when it comes to containers? Are they interested in adopting these? What's the status?
I kind of look at it, so it's a little bit twofold. Like I always start the session like, are you here because you heard the word Kubernetes at some point? Are you here because you heard about Project Pacific from VMware and you got to wrap your head around it? Or are you here because you actually like have a real need?
Right.
And we end up kind of going through, and there's one slide that I made that really tries to figure out like, where am I in this container journey? Like, am I getting my software from a vendor and it's just executables or it's an OVA? Like, do I care about containers today? Do I not? Does it really matter? And that's kind of leading into the next phase of like, are my software vendors, these ISVs, are they going to start delivering things in a container form or in a Kubernetes manifest file or something like that I've got to learn how to go deploy? And so figuring out like where that's going to be in your journey, and then to like people, if they're going to have an issue today or they need it today, those are probably the ones that have in-house development teams. They've got custom applications, and whether they're doing them in .NET or whether they're doing them cloud native ways, they can try to figure out, okay, this is how I can start getting myself ramped up on the technology so I can be prepared to give this to my administrators. I mean, it's the same story we've been hearing for, 5 years now, when people say like, oh, I need a virtual machine fast. I'll just go to the cloud, right? And now it's saying like, oh, I need a Kubernetes cluster fast. I'll just go to the cloud. So vSphere administrators have to understand this is what our developers, this is what our teams are going to be asking for, and so we've just got to stay ahead of the trend and knowing exactly what's next for most of us, especially in the career journey for a lot of people out here too.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm dating myself, but I remember when ISVs didn't support virtualization. They were like, no, if you run it on VMware, we're not going to support that. And then later, they started offering their application in an OVA. We'll just download the OVA and run it in vSphere. And now I'm sure it's going, more and more towards containers, where, like you said, one day, just download the container or the manifest file or whatever it might be. I mean, I feel like it's really smart of VMware to kind of put vSphere admins back in the relevancy circle as kind of the center of the world now, and being the solution providers or problem solvers, for the enterprise, so that they don't go off, to the public cloud and some other solution.
No, I mean, I think there is validity to that, right? I mean, it's VMware has a huge customer base and it's got a huge footprint. And to not embrace the container technology would it'd be an oversight, right? And I think right now, the investment that VMware is making inside of Project Pacific and Tanzu Mission Control and PKS with Essential Enterprise, and making sure that you have a way to be able to say, we've got solutions for now, we got solutions in the future. We give customers the ability to say, we will be ready, you'll be ready to adopt containers when you're ready, right?
Yeah.
We have something today, we have something tomorrow.
Right.
And so being able to give them that option is going to make, a better customer at the end of the day. It's going to make a better user experience, and the more we can actually integrate it with vSphere and the tooling that we all know and love today, whether it's vRealize, whatever it is, then administrators will be much more prepared for their future.
I like that. VMware has an answer, no matter what stage you're at of the journey.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the customers that we're talking to right now, like, this is sometimes that maybe this is the first time they've heard Kubernetes.
Right.
And then some people were like, well, I've been running a few applications on a Docker server inside of my vSphere environment for a while, but I haven't had a need to scale up to something that requires an orchestrator for containers, right? But they already see that's going to be the path forward. Like, they understand that their applications are going to grow, whether they're internal or whether they're ISV, and they've got to understand this is the new realm, and we've got to know how this is going to fit with inside of our data center too.
Very nice, very nice. So in your session, I'm kind of curious, what was the call to action in the end? I mean, if somebody's interested in VMware and containers and Kubernetes, what do you recommend that they do?
Start learning now. And it's start at the very bottom. Everybody thinks of Kubernetes and they're like, okay, I've got to go all in on Kubernetes. I got to learn this. That's going a layer too high. Let's take it back to our VMware days when we were just like learning what is a virtual machine. The first thing we probably did was we spun something up on our own host or our own laptop, and we understood what a virtual machine was. Right. That's, I think, the first thing you got to figure out is what is a container. So install the Docker engine on your laptop, run a few images, and you kind of stand okay, we got layers. I know how to expose services. If I need to scale it, I can scale it. Just here. So I understand how a container works. Now, after you understand how a container works, then you understand all right, well, how do I take multiple containers and web this into a multifaceted application? And we'll take a 3-tiered approach to it, but if you don't want to go through microservice-y, I hate saying it because it feels like you've been beating it with a dead horse for years now, but the idea is to be able to say, okay, how do we take these containers and make them all communicate, interact with one another? How do they provide persistent storage if they need to save their data off of some kind of SQL or Redis or anything like that, some sort of database, and how do we know how to operate multiple containers? And then from there, we understand, okay, we've got this construct, now let's take it up another level, and this is really where Kubernetes comes in. That's your orchestrator. That's what can recover from failures. It's what does all the magic that we're all talking about. And really, what I try to do in my session is I try to make it analogous to everything that we've learned as vSphere administrators, right? Your Kubernetes master is analogous to your vCenter. You've got your API server, you've got your different APIs, you've got your different services. And so being able to take that technology you've already learned and map it to something that you're wanting to learn, it makes it a lot easier to understand.
I think, that's a smart way to go about it. Just like we first spun up virtual machines in VMware Workstation or Fusion on our desktop or laptop, and then later moved to vSphere, and so I like that. Well, I'm going to have to check out your session and learn more. Are there any Kubernetes resources or container resources from VMware that you point people to?
Yeah, absolutely. So there was one that was launched at VMworld this past year. It was Kubernetes.academy.
Okay.
So this is a free training and free resource that is coming from our business unit, and it's completely vendor agnostic. It's nothing that you have to know anything about vSphere. It's just understanding Kubernetes concepts, how to deploy applications, like what do labels mean, what's a deployment of, what's a replica set, what are all these things underneath of it. And then from there, you can also get more hands-on. There's a VMware hands-on lab for not only just for both PKSs, for Essential and for Enterprise.
Okay.
So you can understand from an enterprise user, how do I create a Kubernetes cluster utilizing one single command? And then both of those hands-on labs also have the ability to go and just learn just Kubernetes concepts, how to deploy applications and stuff like that too. So a lot of good resources that are out there today just to get hands-on with it.
Okay, I've watched all those videos, by the way. Kubernetes.academy, really good stuff.
Yeah.
And always great content from the VMware Hands-On Labs. Kenny, it's been great having you on.
You too, David.
Good
Pleasure
to see
seeing you
again.
again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.